I'm sorry. The Mets want to do what? They want Clay Holmes, coveted towering right-handed reliever from the New York Yankees, but as a starter? Yes, you heard that correctly, everybody. Lock in our latest news breakdown that we have here on the WardyNYM platform. Joel Sherman just came out with the following that, yes, the Mets want Clay Holmes, and yes, they want him as a starter. Let me see your initial reactions in the comments down below right here, right now. We're going to deep dive to a T, everything you need to know about Clay Holmes, his arsenal, how he could actually make sense as a starter. What does David Stern seeing Clay Holmes? Why should us Mets fans not write off this idea right away? Is there some skepticism? Absolutely. Am I telling you to think that this is the best thing since sliced bread? No, but what I am telling you is to hear me out, hear this video out before making your ultimate conclusion of your initial thought as to if Clay Holmes will make sense as a starter or not, folks. We're going to deep dive all the latest there just after we did in a key video that dropped a couple hours ago on the Mets showing interest in World Series champ Walker Buehler and starter now turn reliever and Mike Soroka. Check out that video that dropped earlier in case you haven't, folks. Let me see your continued initial reactions down below. And before we deep dive this report, why this makes sense for the Mets and company and their entire coaching staff having a massive factor into this all, let's also hear a quick word from our amazing sponsor that you guys know plenty here at OddsJam. Because in case you guys don't know OddsJam, let me enlighten you. When you look at these results, people are making free money. They're making thousands every month betting on sports completely risk-free. The secret, they're using OddsJam. OddsJam isn't just another betting app. It's turning the entire system in your favor. Here's how OddsJam uses a strategy called arbitrage, finding odds differences across sports books. You can bet both sides, no matter what, you will profit. Here's an example. If you put $500 down on Boise State to win on FanDuel, $335 there on San Fran for the DraftKings, you have a $50 payout, win or lose. It's that simple. With OddsJam mobile app, you'll get real-time alerts with these opportunities every day. People are making thousands monthly, and you can, starting with our promo code WARDY for 35% off and a 7-day free trial. I guarantee that you'll profit during the trial, and if you don't, cancel one click, no questions asked. Don't leave money on the table. Go to oddsjam.com, use code WARDY, and start making money the smart way. Shout out to OddsJam. As always, we appreciate them greatly as an amazing sponsor here, folks. And now as we deep dive the latest reporting, let's get into this here from Joel Sherman of the New York Post on Clay Holmes, because my initial reaction as a Mets fan is, this is kind of crazy to initially see, but then I understand why after doing some homework and understanding that this was a belief that many believe to be the case for Clay Holmes potentially entering this offseason for a little bit now. We're going to reference some key notes here, not only from our great pitching contributor Isaac Rothman here that contributes daily here on the platform for all of our pitching contribution needs, whether it's deep dives on further pitchers, finding out more about them than what you would know commonly when you're searching the web for different information beyond the eye test. And we're also going to reference, shout out to Lance Brozdowski, who did a fantastic breakdown on why Clay Holmes makes sense as a starter a couple weeks ago on his YouTube channel. But as Joel Sherman notes, again, the Mets are showing interest in Clay Holmes here as a starter, and this goes in hand with the recent successes that we've seen with guys like former New York Yankee and former bullpen mate there with the Yanks, and yes, Michael Cain as part of that Juan Soto trade an offseason ago. Michael Cain has been one of the better starters in Major League Baseball the past couple years now, and showing his longevity, his ability to be stretched out rather as a starter. We look at former coveted Mets reliever turned starter Seth Lugo. Seth wanted a starting opportunity a couple years ago. The Mets didn't want to gift it to him heading into the 2023 season. He opts to sign with the San Diego Padres, does fantastic there in a lot of innings, goes to Kansas City, is a Cy Young contender there out of the American League. Seth Lugo is aging like a fine wine. Another great example, the Atlanta Braves with Ronaldo Lopez being stretched out as a starter, former reliever. Yes, he dealt with ailment in the second half, but you know that when it comes to ailment and these guys going from reliever to starter isn't that uncommon, especially when you think of bigger names in recent years. And the Garrett Crochets, who just turned from a reliever to a starter as the most coveted arm now available in the trade market, a Cy Young contender right away should he stay healthy for 2025 and beyond. Remember Spencer Strider, everybody? Another reliever turned starter there, who even though he doesn't have the size and stature, he certainly has the velocity and the fantastic pitch mix and everything that you want from an ace caliber guy there in the National League. There are so many guys, even Zach Littell to a lesser degree there, who was just turned as a starter this past season with that we saw in the the Tampa Bay Rays. The list goes on from there, even to even lesser extenses, Jordan Hicks. So we have seen this work to a degree at the MLB level. It's worked greatly for some teams in recent years that have one thing in common. A lot of them, it's a fantastic pitching lab, a more analytically minded organization, getting the best out of their pitching, especially if, say, they're balling on a budget. The Mets don't have to ball on a budget, and they certainly would love a guy in Clay Holmes that can utilize as both a starter and a reliever, especially as a reliever in instances where, say, they don't love what they're getting from him in the starting role. Maybe Holmes can go back to being a strong setup option for, say, Edwin Diaz instead of being a setup option for Luke Weaver or whoever you're going to have there in the Bronx. Then we get into the familiarity. You know, before we deep dive a bit here on the arsenal for Holmes, you see the stats down below, how fantastic of a overall 2024 campaign he had. Yes, he had a bunch of blown saves, but still a respectable season for a reliever that's been a lot of high leverage situations the past couple years, going from the Pittsburgh Pirates here to the New York Yankees. But one thing that's always stood out, in my opinion, about someone in Clay Holmes, especially now that the Mets have interest, is the current connection between Clay Holmes and the Mets and these two sides here, because the Mets have a couple things in their favor in the pursuit of Clay Holmes, and that is not only Carlos Mendoza, their bench boss during his time with the New York Yankees and Clay Holmes, but it's their most recent hire in that lateral move that I emphasize as a sneakier pickup than what people initially thought, and Desi Druskel, or Druschel, however you pronounce the man's last name, as our new assistant pitching coach to pair with Jeremy Hefner. He's coming over from the Yankees this past season, being their assistant pitching coach, and he's all about pitch shape, newfound information there, really analytically minded. So this is a guy that already has a strong rapport, understanding, and connection there with Clay Holmes, that helped Clay Holmes in his emphasis with the sweeper there, with the sink piece, in which that sinker has so much high rise, and it's such an interesting pitch as well, which makes him such an outlier. And we're going to emphasize outliers here in a second, as he has 3 outlier pitches, as my man Isaac Rothman loves to reference in reference to Clay Holmes here. But stretch out as a starter is something that, as Lance Brozdowski referenced in his most recent video on Clay Holmes on YouTube and in his recent articles, I'm sure, is the following. This is a man who's built his workload up to be able to handle a starter type workload throughout the course of the season. So even though Clay Holmes was in 67 games, 63 innings this past season with a 3.14 ERA, a 3.22 expected ERA, this is a guy that can surpass 100 plus innings again. He was a starter going back to the 2018 season during his time with the Pittsburgh Pirates, but things have obviously changed since then, as he went on to be one of the more dominant relievers for a number of years in the American League now with the New York Yankees. And that Yankee connection with Desi, I think, is fantastic. With Mendoza, that's going to help with not only the familiarity, but the comfortability. We all saw how comfortable Sevy was from the Yanks to the Mets this past year, and the Mets got Sevy right in a way the Yankees simply couldn't. Can the Mets now get Clay Holmes back in the groove, not as just a dominant reliever, but now as a starting option, unlike years prior, like a Michael Cain-esque, potentially like a Seth Lugo, but so much velocity behind it? I think that's absolutely a gamble we're taking for the Mets, as long as they aren't completely reliant on their rotation being gambles, question marks, banking on guys coming off of down seasons. That's why I firmly believe they need to sign at least one certainty of a starter there, with Sean Manaea being in that group, to a lesser extent Walker Buehler, even though I really would like Walker Buehler, that we discussed earlier, and the trade market to really push for the Stars and Garrett Crochet. I wouldn't mind Shane Bieber, even if he comes back later on in the season, even though I know that's a little bit of more of a reclamation thing. Going to trade market for even a Jesus Luzardo, similar applies. I don't expect them to land Fried or Burns, so I know that that's going to come frustrating to some, but when you understand the thought process behind this, is not about penny pinching as much as it is about getting the best out of pitchers, because the pitching lab that we have in-house, I think that's a very important thing to distinguish and differentiate the two between that and everything else. And as we look here at the further arsenal of Clay Holmes, again, it's nasty. You look at everything through Baseball Savant, 86 percentile breaking run value this past season. He has a sink piece there that sits right around 96, 97 miles per hour. We look at the slider that sits 87 and the sweeper at 84. That expected ERA in the 80th percentile, expected batting average 67th percentile, 88th in fastball velo. As we mentioned, right around the league average, and average exit velocity gives up almost 89 miles per hour. Chase percentage was down this past season, down to 37%. Up was whip percentage at 84%. K rate was right there at 67 percentile. Walk percentage right around the league average at 48. 84th for barrel percentage, 69th for hard hit percentage. Ground ball percentage 100th, so he does a fantastic job. And I think would pair beautifully with Francisco Lindor in the middle of this infield, and then whoever we have at third base, whether that's going to be Mark Vientos, continuing to work on his defensive game. No better way to do that than to have Clay Holmes potentially as a starter for 5+ innings to see what you're going to get on the ground ball front. Then what you're going to have Alonso, should he come back, he's going to be diving out plenty at first base. At second base, it's going to be flashing the leather, whether that's Jeff McNeil, whether that's Luis Angel Acuna, whether that's a return of Jose Iglesias, whether that's someone else I didn't mention right now. I love that the prospect of the Mets really having a strong infield defense and having got a guy like Clay Holmes to really put the ball in play a lot. Now, again, I understand the home run rate was up. These blown saves were up this past season, but that goes in hand with why the Mets like the idea of Holmes stretched out into a starter role to see what they can get from 5+ innings. Potentially a guy that before we know could find himself in similarity to Seth Lugo, where he's really getting lanked out of nowhere, giving you 6, potentially even 7 strong innings. It'll be very curious to see how this is all figured out here with his arsenal, but what I do really want to emphasize for each and every one of you are some notes from our fantastic pitching contributor here, Isaac Rothman, and from there, I'm going to add a little bit onto that as well with why I personally believe we're going to see someone like Clay Holmes thrive as a starter, whether he lands with the Mets or anywhere else this offseason at an average annual value of $10 to $15 million, which is likely what he'll be getting regardless on how much you think that's a drastic overpay, with how inflated this market is. Frankie Montas has 17 mil AAV. What else do you expect? Clay Holmes as a dominant reliever, now stretched as a starter. Should he produce any similar value there, he's going to exceed his contract value right away without a problem. So, as we see here, you guys can look right away, and you're going to see this little graph. This graph I'm going to explain in a second for each and every one of you, but Isaac has the following to say, and I quote: "The original thought here with we see in Clay Holmes, now that there's been a belief going back to the beginning of the offseason that he could be stretched as a starter, the initial thought is that his sinker is so good that he has elite ground ball rates, 64% ground ball percentage in the 100th percentile in Major League Baseball that we just noted. This would allow him to be efficient and not throw as many pitches and starts." That's a great point. From there, he has 3 elite pitches that have outlier movement. His sinker is especially unique with his incredible amount of drop, and its unique average at 97 miles per hour makes it a unicorn pitch, and I'm going to emphasize that furthermore in a second. His sweeper is also an outlier pitch with more depth than the most pitchers that we see as right-handers in Major League Baseball. To be a starter, he would need to add a pitch or two, especially potentially like a changeup, which I know Lance Brozdowski feels the exact same way via his YouTube channel. Does fantastic with his pitching analysis. I think a changeup would make plenty of sense, especially for someone like him when you already look at the pitch mix that he has there with the fastball, with the sink piece, and with the sweeper. Mix things up, throw a changeup in there. I think good things tend to happen. And now what you guys can see from the graph is the following. The large circles on this chart are expected movement for pitchers with Holmes' arm angle, and the little dots are actually how his pitches move. See how the little dots are far from the big circles? That means he has serious outlier movement, which makes him unbelievably deceptive for batters. And that sinker is a real heavy point of emphasis here, because this sinker is so special to the point that, yes, Clay Holmes is the only right-handed pitcher in Major League Baseball currently that has a sinker with a higher than right around 6.4 to 6.6 feet and also below 4 inches of vertical break. I mean, this is putting him, again, in that unique unicorn class where no one else even touches him with this type of pitch movement, pitch shape with there on the sinker. And who helped him a lot with that sinker sweeper usage over the past couple of years? It is Desi Druskel, however you pronounce his name, that the Mets hired from the Yankees in a lateral move to the organization to pair with Jeremy Hefner. And that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what does. So before you guys go out of your way to say, okay, I don't like Clay Holmes at all, especially as a starting fit, I want nothing to do with another former Yankee, that's fine to have that closed-minded thought. But if the Mets do in fact sign him and he does ball out and proves yet again why you should believe in David Stearns, I don't want to hear anything coming out of your mouth, because you're the same fan who said everything against Severino Manaea an offseason ago, and then you were proven wrong as much as you were. I understand they're not the exact same circumstance. I also understand that you shouldn't build an entire rotation on reclamation projects. What I know right now is that the Mets have Kodai Senga and David Peterson, 2 very formidable starters in this rotation. Senga is ace caliber. Peterson is nails as a true number 3 right now with the way that he has been pitching. I think we can all argue that rightfully. After that, Frankie Montas is essentially your number 3, even though Peterson, you probably want him there just based on what their current depth chart is. And then you have a lot of uncertainty with the Paul Blackburns, with the Tyler McGills, Brandon Sproat, who I firmly believe will break out into this Mets rotation for 2025. I firmly believe it'll happen either out of spring training or not long heading into the season. It's just about innings and his ability to give the length to the Mets already as a rookie there in 2025. I think he can make that happen. I'm very confident in Brandon Sproat's abilities, and you guys should be to a degree if you've been following along. So if the Mets can hopefully land Sean Manaea or someone more ace caliber along those lines, and in Clay Holmes, I'm not complaining whatsoever. Clay Holmes there, again, you need to make sure that he can handle the innings, which is why should the Mets go to, say, I don't know, a 6-man rotation in 2025, it makes all the more sense in the world to have this type of rotation configuration with Clay Holmes a part of things. We look at his 2023 season, a 2.86 ERA, a 2.79 expected ERA, mostly in high leverage. The year prior, 2.54 with a 2.43. I mean, just dominant stuff that we saw in his first year with the Yankees. His first full year the year prior, 3.6 to a 2.88. This is a guy that just needs to be part of a pitching lab. He's absolutely towering. What is he, like 6'7" at least? He's a giant. Let's see, 6'5", 245. Clay Holmes has a lot of velocity. He can play up, and I firmly believe that the Mets land him, that this is going to be another Stearns masterclass. Again, not saying he's going to be ace caliber like a Lugo or even to a degree a Michael Cain, but I do think that he can be formidable for this Mets rotation, which makes a lot of sense versus overpaying on guys that we know at best are going to move laterally in next season, whether that's a Luis Severino or someone else, where you know that there's actual upside beyond what we even know to this point in Clay Holmes' career as a starter. So take all that information however you will, everybody, but thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like and subscribe on your way out. Let us know your continued thoughts down below if you're in favor or against Clay Holmes landing with the Mets as a starter. And if you guys enjoy this content and want to see more, just be on the lookout because we have a lot coming out throughout the week as we are just a week away from winter meetings. This is your guy Wardy signing out, and as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace.